The US presidential election is just around the corner. With the entire world waiting in anticipation, either one of two candidates will prevail: the Democratic nominee Kamala Harris or the Republican nominee Donald J. Trump. To discuss this election, as well as the American Muslim role in American politics and Palestine activism in general, I am joined today by Dr. Osama Abu Irshaid, the Executive Director of American Muslims for Palestine. Dr. Osama, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start with what many would consider the beginning. You are a Palestinian American, but you, like all other Palestinians, have been affected by the Nakba of 1948. Could you please kind of take through your background, how the Nakba affected your family and how you got to where you are today?
First, thank you for hosting me and for having me for this podcast. Originally, my family comes from a village, a small village in Jenin. But this part of Jenin was occupied in 1948. It's in northern Jenin. The village's name is Nouris. Now there is a kibbutz in Nouris called Nurit. I was able to visit in August 2023. This was my first and my last visit to Palestine. And I went to Nouris, to our village, which is about 20 kilometers south of Bishan or Bisan. And it was an amazing experience to feel the restoration of your sense of belonging, that you belong to somewhere, that you belong to a place, that you belong to a land. That was my experience with Nouris when I visited. My father was born in Bisan, not in Nouris. I grew up in Jordan from a refugees family. My father used to take us to the Jordan Valley, to a village in the Jordan Valley called Tsura. And every time he took us when we were young, we stand by the Yarmouk River, which is basically a creek, not even a river. And every time he pointed with his hand towards Bisan, and he said, if they would allow me to walk from here to Bisan, I will take you to where I was born. The way I envisioned the distance between where we used to stand and where my father used to point with his finger is that there is an ocean between where he was born and where we were standing. But when I was able to cross into Palestine in 2023, I was taken by surprise that it's only like 5 kilometers, because I was able to pinpoint where my father was born. I think I got to one of the ruins of the houses that most likely was one of the house of my grandparents. It was like 5 kilometers from where my father was born. And my father now is 83 years old. He never was able to visit the village the city that he was, the town that he was born in, which is Bisan, or to visit the village that we come from, which is Nouris. But I was able to do that. But now it's taken by Jewish settlers who claim ownership of a land that belonged to a people that existed way before them, not only in the recent history, but also in the distant history, since the Canaanites inhabited the land of Palestine.
Since then, in your time growing up in Jordan, you studied at Loughborough University, completed your PhD, and you made your way to America, where you continued struggling and advocating for Palestinian rights. And then the American Muslims for Palestine organization was established. Could you tell us how and why this organization was established?
So as I said, I grew up in Jordan. And, for those who, from a Palestinian descent who grew up in Jordan, they always have that conflict. Are we Palestinians or are we Jordanians or Palestinian Jordanians? So I always espouse that internal conflict, because it's very difficult to determine your identity. I'm not going to talk about the people here in Jordan because the people are good people here and we're all the same people. My mother is from a Jordanian descent. But there is this institutionalized racism, against Palestinians. So it was always difficult to figure out, where do I belong? What do I belong to? I belong to Jordan because I love Jordan. It's my homeland. I grew up in Jordan. I love Jordan. It's my country. It's my homeland. But also I felt like I was ejected or not totally embraced. So Palestine is my other affiliation, but I never was part of Palestine. I never restored that sense of belonging until 2023, which was a quick visit. So I grew up with that sense of deprivation. When I went to study in Morocco for my BA, I went there, and that's where I discovered, I would say, my roots and my role and my sense of mission for Palestine. The Oslo Accords were signed in 1993. That's when I became active for Palestine. When I was watching the ceremony of signing the Oslo Accords, I still remember I started tearing up because I felt my sense of belonging was restored, but I was ejected immediately from it because I come from the 1948 land, the land that was occupied in 1948. I don't come from the 1967 land or the land that was occupied in 1967. That's when I became very active for Palestine. And to be active for Palestine in the Arab world is not a good thing, because we're targeted. People who speak on behalf of the Palestinian rights are targeted, are not very welcomed by the regimes. I'm not talking about the people. The people love Palestine, mainly in Morocco. And when I came back to Jordan, I worked for 1 year, and then I traveled to the United States since late 1996. And again, after 2000, I became active for Palestine. I continued my activism throughout until today. And I know what it means also to be an activist for Palestine in the United States, because now you're more targeted. There is an institutionalized racism, and you're going against the public sentiment, at least in the early years in the United States. Now things are shifting in terms of in the public opinion domain. But I became a target of the US government after 2011, after the 9/11 attacks. I became a target because of my Palestinian activism. I was denied of my citizenship between 2006, because that's when I was eligible to get my citizenship, until 2017, when I sued the government and I got my citizenship. But during these years, I continued to be a target. And afterward, I continued to be a target because of the incitement by the Zionist lobby against myself and against Palestinian activists in America. And we know that there are Palestinian activists who have who were wrongfully convicted of frivolous charges and now are in jail for decades. They're going to be in jail. Some of them have been convicted and sentenced for 65 years in jail. So I know what it means to be an activist for Palestine. But we continued this, myself and others. We continued to be engaged in advocating for Palestine and educating the American public and raising awareness about Palestine in the United States. In 2006, AMP, American Muslims for Palestine, was formed. I'm not going to take any credit here because I wasn't one of the founders of the American Muslims of Palestine, but it was formed basically to fill a void within the Muslim community. Right after 9/11, 2001, there was a vacuum in terms of Palestinian activism. As I said, the Palestinians or Palestinian activists were specifically targeted after 9/11. So there was a vacuum created. Palestine became a hot potato. No one wanted to touch Palestine. AMP was created to fill this void within the American Muslim community. And I became involved in 2010. And in 2015, we opened our office in Washington, D.C. And that's when we recognized that the space for the Palestine work in the United States is much bigger, much larger, much wider than our community. That's when we recognize that we have allies that are non-Arab, non-Muslims, non-Palestinians, who are fully engaged and working to advance the Palestinian rights and the Palestinian narrative in the United States. And that's when we injected our community into this work, working with Jewish organizations, Christian organizations, Black organizations, Latino organizations, many organizations that are involved, heavily involved in the work for Palestine. So AMP took off, I would say, in 2015 in terms of the intersectionality work, in terms of injecting Palestine into the public opinion domain, in terms of injecting Palestine into the debate about Israel in the United States. And in 2021, during COVID, we formed another organization, which we call a 501c4 organization, which is dedicated for lobbying for Palestine. This is not a tax-exempted organization. This is a political organization. It's our political arm that fully advocates for Palestine without any constraints, because if you are a 501c3 or tax-exempted organization, there is a certain percentage that you cannot exceed in terms of advocacy, in terms of lobbying. But under a 501c4 category, you can do much more in terms of advocacy and in terms of lobbying. And that was our Americans for Justice in Palestine action, AGP action, that is doing most of our advocacy work, while AMP continues to work within the Muslim community and continues to work in the education and raising awareness domain, while AGP is working in the advocacy domain.
In terms of your political work, how would you say the reception has been in Washington, D.C.? You know, apart from maybe getting an appearance and a meeting here and there, what's kind of has there been an effect on policy through your political work?
So I've seen the transformation because when we started in 2015, when we held our first Palestine Advocacy Day, when we brought constituents to go to Congress to meet for American citizens to meet with their representatives and senators, we had about 25 people who came mainly from the Washington, Maryland, D.C. area or region. But after that, we started to organize more on a professional grounds. We were learning throughout. And now, alhamdulillah, we hold the largest Palestine Advocacy Day in Capitol Hill in the United States. We go to Congress and we advocate for Palestine. I still remember when we went, when we held our first meetings in 2015, that there wasn't a lot of reception from members of Congress, from congressional offices, from the State Department that we visited with. They were new to people speaking about Palestine in an organized way. I'm not going to say and deny that there are people who preceded us and who continue to work for Palestine, but it was more in an organized way where we bring hundreds of people to Washington, D.C. to go. We train them and we provide them with talking points. They go to congressional offices and they speak about Palestine. The first few years that we used to do this, we didn't have a lot of allies. Now we have more allies in the congressional offices. You might go to an office where you have an astonished supporter of Israel, like Chuck Schumer, but you will have staffers of Chuck Schumer, who's the majority leader in the Senate, who are more sympathetic to Palestine and the Palestinian people, and who are working from within these offices to demand more of a balanced approach by their bosses. So we've seen this transformation where we had, members of Congress who were elected mainly in the House who are more supportive of Palestine. Now, like Jamal Bowman, like Mary Newman, like Rashida Tlaib, like Ilhan Omar, like Buchanan and others who are supporters of Palestine, while we didn't have this years ago. At that time, we used to talk about one congresswoman who was supportive of Palestine. I'm trying to remember her name now, but she was the only supporter of Palestine. We had one member, but now we had over 10, 15 who are more supportive of the Palestinian rights. So we've seen the transformation, and we've seen the transformation even within the State Department, where you had staffers now who come out and tell you, you know what, I do support your causes. The congresswoman that I wanted to mention, her name is Betty McCollum. She was the only one in 2015 at that time. Now we have, alhamdulillah, 6 who are astonishingly supportive of Palestine, supportive of the Palestinian rights, and others who are on the fences, who are very close to us and close to our causes. But when we went to the State Department, that's when we started to recognize that there are, those who support our rights, support the Palestinian rights, those who are critical of Israel. And they started feeling more comfortable to come out and say, there is a debate within the State Department, and by you coming and demanding more of a balanced approach, by you speaking out as constituents, as citizens, you are changing the narrative here. Now we have to pay attention to your voices. Now we can say that there are other voices here in the American society that are demanding a different approach, American approach to the Israeli occupation. And I think we've seen evidence during this genocide that is taking place in Gaza, where you have many officials. Some of them are political appointees, some of them are professionals who have resigned in protest of the American complete complicity with Israel in this genocide. So I would say, no, we've seen the transformation that started sometime maybe around 2009 when Barack Obama was elected as president. I understand that Obama ended up with being more complicit, or at least as complicit as his predecessors and as those who followed him. But he did change the narrative. He did change the debate about Israel, because he came from a background that had more knowledge about the Palestinian plight and the Palestinian rights. Someone who dared to say, when he in his first year in the White House, that there has to be a daylight between the United States and Israel. Yes, there was a backlash against him after that. Yes, he had to take back that statement in 2010, prior to the midterm elections at that time, under the pressure from Democrats who feared that they will lose the elections because of Israel. But he did change the narrative. And he continued to clash with Netanyahu at the time. He continued to clash with the Zionist lobby, and the Zionist lobby continued to go after him. And Democrats weren't very happy, mainly after Netanyahu was invited by the Republican majority in the House to address the U.S. Congress, in a position of the nuclear deal with Iran. That was taken as a bad sign, as a negative sign from Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition against Democrats. He was aligning himself more with Republicans at the expense of Democrats, and that helped create making Israel more of a partisan issue that transcends politics, or actually that Israel is no longer a matter of consensus, no longer a matter that transcends politics in America. That helped us, in advancing our narrative and our discourse that Israel is a liability, that Israel is interfering in our politics, that Israel is only concerned about its interest, and it does not care about the U.S. national security and national interest. So that helped to create a new narrative, mainly within Democrats, mainly within progressives. And now, today, according to the public opinion polls, the majority of Democrats, and I'm talking now about the base, not about the establishment, not about the leadership of Democrats. The majority of Democrats are more sympathetic to Palestinian rights as opposed to Israel. And this trajectory is continuing upward, and Israel understands this. And by what Netanyahu is doing now, by aligning himself more with conservatives, more with the Republicans in America, it is helping our narrative, and it is helping our advocacy, that by making Israel a controversial issue, no longer a consensus issue in American politics.
Over the last year, the US has on one hand said that they are working tirelessly around the clock to attain a ceasefire, and on the other hand, they continuously send bombs and arms to the Zionists as they commit their genocide. How would you categorize America's current relationship or current involvement in the Israeli genocide in Gaza?
It's a complete complicity and complete partnership. The Biden administration is as guilty, as criminal as the Netanyahu government. That's the bottom line of it. I was explaining that the Democratic base is moving away from Israel. Israel understands this. The Democratic Party, the leadership, the establishment understands this. But the establishment within Democrats continues to be complicit, continues to be pro-Israel, and continues to be against Americans, national interest and security interests. This is something that we've seen, we're witnessing now on a daily basis. The Biden administration was overtaken by surprise when October 7th happened. The Biden administration thought that they have pacified the region. They thought that the region was under control. They were on a trajectory to bring Saudi Arabia into the normalization agreements with Israel, the Abrahamic Accords. So they thought that this region was pacified. And we all know now that Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor, wrote an essay in Foreign Affairs at that time, bragging about the fact that the region is under control, and now we can focus more on China in the Indo-Pacific region. We can focus on containing China and continuing to deplete Russia in Ukraine. That was his argument. Of course, after October 7th happened, this essay that he wrote, or this piece, was edited, and this part was taken out from it, because they understood now, and they got to know that this was a false narrative, and they got to know that this was a false assumption. The region have not been pacified, and it was evident on October 7th. So the United States was taken by surprise, because the whole structure that the United States wanted to build in the region was based on a cornerstone. And this cornerstone is Israel. The US was retreating from the area, wasn't leaving, wasn't evacuating, but was retreating, because now the focus again is the Indo-Pacific region. But they wanted to assure its allies, its anxious allies, that it's not going to leave them with Iran. So they brought Israel into the mix, into the equation, and they told them Israel is the military might that you can depend on, and this military might is supported by the United States. So there is nothing to worry about. Israel is there, got your back, and we're behind you and behind Israel. Even if we leave, even if we retreat, we're going to continue to support you and support Israel. On October 7th, it turned out that Israel wasn't that military might that everyone thought of at the time. So the United States needed to come back to reinstate the deterrence, quote unquote, the Israeli deterrence. So it sent aircraft carriers, it sent a nuclear submarine, it sent more air jets or fighter jets, squadrons, more soldiers into the region, in order to boost Israel's image. And it was successful. I'm not going to deny that the fact that the US was successful, in boosting Israel's deterrence. And this is evident now in the genocide that it has been committing for over a year in Gaza now. And it's evidence in what it was able to accomplish in Lebanon. But still, Israel is unable to decisively win this war, because again, you have not addressed the root cause. The root cause is the Israeli occupation, is the Israeli apartheid, is the Israeli crimes, is the Israeli genocide. The root cause is that Israel continues to misbehave, and Israel continues to occupy, and continues to discriminate, and continues to cause instability in the region. So the United States wanted to boost Israel's deterrence, but at the same time drag the US into this quagmire here in the region. Now the US is no longer able to only or solely focus on the Indo-Pacific region, that the United States calls them the most consequential geostrategic threat to its dominance in the world. Still, the US cannot focus, because again, it's being distracted by Israel, by its complicity with Israel, by its blindly following Israel. Biden has been trying now for over maybe 7-8 months now to impose or enact a ceasefire that guarantees Israel's security and dominance in the region by what they call the next day in Gaza. But Netanyahu continues to defy the United States and continues to defy Biden, because he knows Biden is in a hard place. He cannot go against Israel. He cannot apply real pressure on Israel because he will be accused by Republicans and by the Democratic establishment that he has abandoned Israel, while Israel continues to risk and endanger the American national interest. So he continues to support him. He continues to give him all of the weapons that he needs. The U.S. security military presence in the region is expanding. The U.S. is unable to focus on the Indo-Pacific region. The U.S. is unable to contain China anymore, and the U.S. is unable to bring Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire in exchange of a normalization agreement or pact with Saudi Arabia, which is part of the Biden's what he hopes to be his legacy or his foreign policy legacy. So Israel continues to drag the United States, and the United States continues to be a partner in these crimes, in this genocide that is being committed in Gaza, and at the same time is risking and undermining Americans' national interest in the region.
Some would say that Biden, he may have had like a bit of an excuse in terms of he needs the votes, right? And he doesn't want to go against the so-called Zionist lobby or the Israel lobby. And so he would kind of go along with the genocide. But right now he's not up for re-election. And really, it doesn't seem like he has much to lose if he was to do what he can to actually stop the genocide. So why does Biden continue to support the genocide as he does?
Because on a personal level, he has this sympathy and empathy with Israel. On a personal level, he supports Israel. On a personal level, he's emotionally invested in Israel, and he made this clear. He always told us about the dumb stories about his father when he told him you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist, about his first meeting with Golda Meir, the late Israeli prime minister. So he made it very clear about his emotional, personal investment in Israel. That's one. Two, I think he understands that even if he's not running, that this will stain his legacy. And that's why now we know for a fact from different accounts that he uses slur words against Netanyahu, and he thinks that Netanyahu has stained his presidency and undermined his presidency. We know that for a fact, but he doesn't have the moral I'm trying to remember. He doesn't have that moral credibility, and he does not have the bravery to say that Israel is hurting the United States and hurting its stance in the world. So he continues to support Netanyahu, but this will also harm and undermine Harris's chances. Now, I'm not saying that Harris is going to lose the elections because of Gaza, but it is a possibility. Now we're less than 2 weeks away from the elections, and there is a possibility that she might lose the elections because of her position on Gaza, because of Biden's unwillingness to enact a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, because of Biden's unwillingness to impose an arms embargo consistent with the American laws, not only the international law, but with American laws on Israel. So there is this possibility. But he has that personal attachment, that personal investment in Israel. He has that his own bias, his own complicity, and she's in the case of Harris, she's a hostage also of the Democratic establishment, not the Democratic base, the Democratic establishment. So they both lack that moral courage when it comes to imposing or enacting or forcing a ceasefire on Israel by threatening to cut military aid to Israel. That's all what it takes, to cut military aid. We all remember that when Biden decided to withdraw the USS Roosevelt from the Eastern Mediterranean Sea a few months ago, that Israel panicked. They were so terrified that they would be left to deal with Hezbollah at the time on their own without the American support. Everyone understands that Israel could have not started and continued this genocide and these war fronts that it has opened in the whole region with Iran, with Yemen, with Iraq, if it wasn't for the United States coming to its rescue. But the United States is not using that leverage, or the Biden administration is not using that leverage. In fact, no, he is digging a deeper hole of the American complicity and the American involvement in the region, when now America cannot exit without finding a solution. And this solution seems to be impossible. It always evades what the best efforts of the Biden administration. Now, Antony Blinken is in the region. It's going to be another failure, because why would Netanyahu give Biden a gift while Biden is leaving office in 2.5 months from now, and the new president could come? So if he's giving a gift, it's going to be to the next president, if he's going to give any gift. So that's the imbalance in the American-Israeli relationship. The U.S. is the country that supports Israel, that maintains its superiority in the region, but Israel is able always to manipulate the United States. And as Netanyahu said in 2001, that America is something that is easy to move, easy to manipulate, and he is the one who knows how to move and to manipulate the United States. This is something that he said on an open mic, a hot mic, that he wasn't aware that he's being recorded in 2001, and he has proven himself right, that he can manipulate the United States. And this country that is taking care of Israel, this country that is enabling Israel, that is providing this diplomatic, financial, military support to Israel, is being used and being manipulated by a vassal state, that depends on it, instead of the United States being able to influence Israel. It's unfortunate that we see that Israel is influencing the United States and its decisions.
Is it then the case that the Zionist lobby or the Israel lobby is as strong as people say? Or is there another reason that the United States is attached at the hip to Israel?
Where we cannot undermine the influence of the lobby. It is a very, very powerful lobby. Even Obama, after his presidency came to an end, he acknowledged that the Zionist lobby or the Israeli lobby is so powerful in the United States. This is something that no one should question, and I don't think anyone questions the fact that it is a very powerful lobby. But this is not the only reason. There are other historical, religious, and political reasons why Israel is so influential. Let us remember that the United States is a Protestant country, and you have about 83 million people who are those who are called evangelical, who believe in the end of days war, the Armageddon theology, the second return of the Messiah. So we have to factor this in. Protestant believe in the Old and in the New Testaments, and that's one of the reasons why they support Israel. That's number one. These early settlers who came to the United States or to America, what is known now today as America, they used to call themselves the new children of Israel. So there was this theology of people coming out of the exodus and coming back to the United States to settle in the United States and to rebuild America as we know it today, as the Israelis will go back to the land of Canaan or go back to Palestine and rebuild the land there. There's another reason. America is an imperial country. We cannot discount this fact. The United States is built on expansion since the 1800s under the Monroe Doctrine, when America declared hegemony in the Western Hemisphere. Before that, we know that the United States also occupied lands from Mexico at the time. So also there's this imperial factor where America wants an advanced aircraft carrier, and Israel is the best, most stable aircraft carrier in the region. The U.S. Used Iran at one point, but when you had an Islamic revolution in Iran, Iran became an arch enemy of the United States. In Israel, even if you will have a revolution that will topple the regime, Israel will continue to be an ally of the United States because it cannot exist and continue to exist without the United States. So there are these religious reasons as well. So the imperial reasons. And we can't undermine that the Zionist lobby was very successful in endearing Israel into the American public. If you watch Hollywood, all Israel is always portrayed in a positive view. If you follow these superheroes movies, there is always a Jewish component into it, you know. So they were very successful in endearing the Israeli project to the American public. Now, I want to differentiate between Jews and between Israel, because our animosity is not with the Jewish people. In fact, there are so many Jewish allies of ours in the United States who are principled, who are moral when it comes to their position and to their stand against Israel and apartheid in occupied Palestine. But I'm talking about the Zionist project as a settler colonial project as opposed to a Jewish project.
You mentioned earlier that public opinion has changed in the United States. How would you say public opinion has changed, and what would you say was the effect of the 7th of October and the subsequent genocide on public opinion?
So when I say the public opinion has changed in America, I'm not making a claim here. It is a supported claim. We know from the Pew Institute, from other public opinion institutions, that like Gallup, like the Chicago University, there was a public opinion poll that was conducted by them, by Maryland University, that all suggest that there is a shift in the American public opinion in terms or relevant to Israel/Palestine. If I remember correctly, there was a Gallup poll on March 16, if I remember correctly, 2023, that showed that Israel's favorability in America has declined to its lowest point since 1948. It was, if I remember correctly, about 45% of the American public said that they support and they view Israel favorably, as opposed to 31% who said the same about Palestine, that they view Palestinians favorably. This was the lowest point for Israel at that time. This was prior to October 7th. Within Democrats, we know that the majority of Democrats are more supportive, more sympathetic to Palestinians as opposed to Israel. If I remember correctly, about 49% in that same public opinion poll who said that they're sympathetic with the Palestinian people, as opposed to maybe to 21%. I have to check the numbers, but I'm confident about that the wide gap between the support for Palestinian rights in the Democratic Party as opposed to Israel, and also the decline in American support, or the Americans' public support for Israel in the Gallup poll in March 2023. Now, after October 7th, there was a spike in terms of sympathy and support for Israel within Democrats and within the American public opinion poll. Definitely. The way the media portrayed this, it was devoid from a context that there is an Israeli occupation, that there are Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people, that there is an apartheid. So it was devoid. Like history started on October 7th. So there was a spike in terms of support of Israel, with the images coming from the settlements around the Gaza Strip at the time. There was this spike. There's more sympathy with Israel, but this started to steadily decline after that, with the images coming from Gaza now. Because yes, they tried to portray that October 7th was the beginning of history in the Gaza context, but they couldn't deny the fact, or they couldn't deny the flow of images that are coming from Gaza that showed that history didn't end there. It didn't stop there. It continued. Now there are war crimes being committed. There are horrific sceneries, images coming from Gaza. There is a genocide that is taking place now. You have more than 19,000 children have been killed. You have Gaza being decimated. You have the infrastructures being completely destroyed. So they could not stop the flow of facts that are coming from Gaza. Although they tried to censor this, they tried to blame it on the victims. They tried to blame it on the Palestinian people. They tried to blame it on the Gazan people. They tried to blame it on the civilians that they put themselves in the crossfire. They tried to blame it on those who are fighting back against Israel, that they use the civilians as a human shields. But at the end of the day, the images continue to come from Gaza, to emerge from Gaza, that shows civilians are being massacred, that shows children are being massacred. So the public opinion started to shift back, against Israel, and the favorability decline continued to increase among the American people. If I remember, there was another poll by Quinnipiac University at the end of 2023, in December 2023, that showed that Israel's favorability dropped to 49%, the first time ever in the American-Israeli bilateral relationships where Israel's favorability was below 50%. So I would say, and I would argue, that the majority of Americans are pro-ceasefire, they're pro-arm embargo on Israel. If Israel does not stop the genocide in Gaza, this does not mean that they're pro-Hamas. So we have to be very clear about this. Does not mean that they're pro-Palestinians, but they want a ceasefire because they cannot process the horrific images, the horrific crimes that are being committed by American-made weapons, by American diplomatic support, by American financial support, by American complete complicity that is implicating the United States in these war crimes. So the public opinion started to shift, at least in terms of demanding a ceasefire, an end to genocide in Gaza, or if they don't call it genocide, an end to this madness that is taking place in Gaza. So we continue to see that this is that the sympathy with the Palestinian victims is increasing, not necessarily with why the Palestinians are fighting or why the Palestinians continue to resist, but at least to identify with them on a humane level.
The most consequential elections in the United States, probably in recent memory, are coming up. We have two front runners. We have Kamala Harris on one hand for the Democrats and Trump on the other hand for the Republicans. And we also have Dr. Jill Stein for the Green Party, and there are other independents. What would you say, in your estimation or your understanding, is the several candidates' policies with regards to ending the genocide, should they become president?
So we have two viable candidates. It's Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And now we have other third-party candidates like Jill Stein, Cornel West, or Chase Oliver. In the case of the three latter candidates, Stein, West, and Oliver, they are pro-permanent ceasefire, pro-arms embargo on Israel. In the case of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they both are pro-Israel. But there are, of course, differences between them. Donald Trump wants Israel to go all the way in, to continue to destroy Gaza, decimate Gaza, and to uproot whatever resistance left in Gaza. And he does not shy away from talking about the beautiful beaches of Gaza and rebuilding Gaza to be another Singapore in the region and to be inhabited by Jewish settlers. The same thing was said by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. In the case of Kamala Harris, she continues to follow, she continues the policy, or she's a continuation of the Biden failed approach. Full complicity with Israel while demanding a ceasefire and the day after arrangements in Gaza, where Hamas does not rule Gaza anymore, and Saudi Arabia is injected into the Abraham Accords, and they build a new regional structure where Israel is the cornerstone of that structure, to contain Iran and to maintain the American interest in the region. We are in a very difficult place as a Palestinian Arab and Muslim American community. We are in a very difficult place because we cannot reward Kamala Harris for the crimes that were committed under her watch as the VP of Joe Biden. She's not only the Democratic candidate, she is the vice president of the of the president of the United States. She is part of the crime that is being committed, that has been committed and being committed by Israel because of the American unconditional support to Israel. So we cannot just reward her based on this. At the same time, we don't want Donald Trump to be in office because we know that Donald Trump poses a threat not only to Palestine, Gaza, the West Bank, and the whole region, the so-called Middle East, but also poses a threat to us as a Muslim community in the United States and poses a threat to the United States stability. We know that this is a man who tried to steal the elections in 2020, and he's promising a bloodbath if he loses the election in 2024. So it's not something that we embrace to see Trump in office. Again, we're in a very difficult position. We tried to communicate with the Harris campaign. We spoke to some officials in her campaign. We tried to get from her a statement that she will work to impose a ceasefire in Gaza, that she will enact an arms embargo on Israel if Israel continues the war crimes in Gaza, continues this war. She would not give us that. Yes, she softened the rhetoric of Biden. Yes, she is more sympathetic or comes across as more sympathetic to the Palestinian rights and to the situation, the disaster that exists in Gaza. But she's not willing to substantially change the policy on Israel and the unconditional support that the United States provide Israel with. That's what put us in this difficult position that we couldn't endorse her while we don't want to see Trump in office again. The majority of Muslims, I would argue, are going to vote for Palestine. Let me rephrase that. The majority of the immigrant Muslim community, including those who were born in the United States, are going to support Palestine. But Muslim African Americans are going to support, the majority of them are going to vote for Kamala Harris. This is for historical reasons. African Americans in general, including Muslim African Americans, are more supportive of the Democratic Party as opposed to the Republican Party. And this Palestine is one of the issues for them. Yes, they're very supportive, they're very sympathetic with the Palestinian people, with Gaza. They're very critical of the Biden approach, Harris approach, the full complicity with Israel. But they see that they have other priorities. It's not only Palestine, but also civil rights, civil liberties. It's the reproductive rights in America. It's the institutionalized racism that tends to flourish more under Republicans. So there are other concerns, and we have the same concerns, as an immigrant, quote unquote, American Muslim community. But it is very difficult for us morally to say that we're going to pretend as if genocide is not happening in Gaza, that it's not happening under the watch and full complicity and support of the Biden-Harris administration. So we're put in that very difficult position. I would say our community now is split between Jill Stein, Kamala Harris, and we have about 12%, according to some some polls that were conducted recently within the American Muslim community, that suggests that 12% are going to support Donald Trump for various reasons. So the community is split. If the elections is too close, mainly in the swing states, this could spell a disaster for Kamala Harris. If the margins are wide, whether in her favor or in favor of Trump, then our votes will be irrelevant. But so far, based on what we know, based on the public opinion polls, based on the polls that were conducted in the swing states, this election is going to be too close to call. And a few hundreds or a few thousand votes might make a difference. So our votes might make the difference in states like Michigan, in states like Arizona, in states like Wisconsin, in states like Georgia. And the Kamala Harris understands this. That's why there was another attempt to reach out to the Muslim community just in in the last 2 weeks. There were attempts by her campaign. Again, what Muslims asked from Kamala Harris's campaign is that we want a substantial change when it comes to your policy on Israel. We know that you're not the president today, but if you win, we want a clear promise from you that you will impose an arms embargo on Israel, that you will end this unconditional support to Israel if Israel does not enact an immediate ceasefire. Unfortunately, she would not give us that pledge, and that, again, makes it very difficult for us to endorse her and support her in the elections. And even if the American Muslim leadership asks the community to support Kamala Harris, the majority of our community, or the so-called American Muslim community, is not going to follow suit.
You've mentioned quite succinctly there that there is quite a lot of agony within the Muslim community over the choices that are available to them. Can America really be called a democracy if you either choose one person who's currently committing genocide or another person who is promising to commit a worse genocide?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I just didn't get the first part of the question.
You have succinctly put there how there is a lot of agony within the Muslim community in America over who to vote for in the upcoming election. Can you really call America a democracy when, on the one hand, you have to choose between a person who is currently committing genocide or, on the other hand, a person who promises to commit a worse genocide?
Well, this is a complicated question because we can't deny that America is a democracy, although it's not a perfect democracy. I mean, the choices are very limited. We're talking about two individuals with real chances to win the presidency. We have two-party system. We don't have multi-party system. Now, the UK is a multi-party system. It used to be a two-party system. Israel used to be a two-party system. Now it's a multi-party system. America continues to be a two-party system, two viable candidates for the presidency. Does this undermine the American democracy? I would say definitely yes, because your choices is between bad and worse. It's not between good and bad. So that's something that even average Americans recognize, either Democrat or Republican. In some rare cases, you might have an independent but leaning Democrat or leaning Republican. So they have to caucus with one of the two parties. You can't have independents in Congress who don't caucus with one of the two main parties in Congress, because we don't have a third party, although we have the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, but they have no influence on the political process. They have no representation, not at the state level, not at a federal level, absolutely no representation. So we continue to function within the two-party system, which undermines our democracy. But I cannot say that there is no democracy exists in America, because democracy is not only about elections. It's about the freedom of expression. It's about your ability to fight for your rights, to fight for what you believe in. It's about the right to dissent. It's about the right to protest. It's about the right to try to change the dynamics and the trajectory in America. If you can do it peacefully, then go ahead and do it. No one will deny you of creating the right to create a third party, to form a third party in America and have a multi-party system in America if you can garner enough support from the American public. But it's unfortunate that we didn't get to that point. I'm not going to reduce the American democracy to what is happening in Gaza, although this is a testament, although this tells us that there is a dysfunctionality within our democracy, where even if the majority of Americans are opposed to what is happening in their name in Gaza, still they cannot change it. We have our politicians who continue to say that we don't rule by public opinion polls. We rule based on what we think is in the best interest of the United States. In fact, they're lying. They're not ruling based on what they think is in the best interest of the United States. They're ruling based on what they think is in their personal best interest, based on their political expediency. We've seen this with the invasion of Iraq. We've seen this with the invasion of Vietnam in the 1960s. And we've seen this now with the American continued complicity in the genocide in Gaza. Again, the public opinion polls are very clear that a majority of Americans are opposed to what is happening in their name. They want an end to this. Again, it's not that they're supportive of the resistance in Gaza. No, they want to see a ceasefire. That's what they want. But our politicians are not listening, because at the end of the day, the same people who are saying that this is our demand, this is what we want, are not holding them responsible based on this. The majority of Americans who are pro-ceasefire are not voting solely based on this. The majority of Americans who say we're more sympathetic with Palestinians are not making this a condition to support their members of Congress or to support their presidential candidates. What we're trying to do now is to make this a precondition, a prerequisite, and to get to receive the support that you need to win as a candidate, whether as a presidential candidate or as a member, as a congressional candidate. In 20, I'm trying to remember the analogy. It was sometime in 2012. There was a majority of Americans, if I remember correctly, about 79% of Americans who were pro gun control and more restrictive laws on the right to carry weapons in America. The right to bear arms in America is a constitutional right. It's the Second Amendment. So no, the government cannot take this right away from you. But what the government can do is regulate this right to bear arms. Obama was the president at the time. Democrats were the majority in the House and the Senate at the time. So Obama could have changed the laws if he wanted to, and he wanted to. But the congressional members or members of the Democratic members of Congress did not go along with him. And when they tried to analyze it, they found that the majority of Americans who were demanding this from their members of Congress and from their government were less enthusiastic, less passionate about this cause. So yes, they wanted to see a change when it comes to stricter gun laws, but they weren't holding the majority of them weren't holding their members of Congress accountable to their vote when it comes to stricter gun laws. While the minority, who are represented by the NRA, the National Rifle Association, are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars every election cycle. When they go vote, it's almost a single issue for them, criteria for them, and that is where my member of Congress stands on the issue of gun rights in America. So we're trying to bridge this gap between enthusiasm and passion and conviction. We have the conviction on our side, but we don't have the enthusiasm and passion from the majority of those who share the conviction with us. And that's what undermines our democracy, that the majority of Americans still cannot make the link between their convictions and between holding their members of Congress and their president responsible when it comes to their convictions and how they want them to act on them.
An argument has been made in support of Kamala Harris, saying that if we get her into power, then we can influence her on policies, especially with regards to the Gaza genocide. Now, in 2020, overwhelmingly, the American Muslim community voted for Joe Biden. Yet the American Muslim community has not seemingly been able to do anything in the way of changing American policy towards Israel and ending complicity in the genocide. What would make this time around any different? What guarantees are there that once Kamala gets into power, she will actually start listening?
Well, there are no guarantees, and she refuses to give us any guarantees, and she refuses even to give us a pledge that she can walk back tomorrow. All what we wanted from her is a pledge. Just say, we were very happy when Biden dropped out. Uh, when he dropped out from running, we were very happy. We thought that this presented us with an opportunity to support the Democratic nominee because we know that the other option is very bad. It's Donald Trump. We know what Donald Trump stands for. No one wants to see Donald Trump. It's not because we like Biden. It's not because we think Kamala Harris is much better. But definitely, when you compare her to Trump or you compare Biden to Trump, they're better. But they're not much better if you take this in an abstract. She refused to give us that pledge, and she refused to help her to win the presidency. Now, some of us continues to argue that still we have to support Kamala Harris because when you compare Democrats to Republicans, we have more allies within the Democratic Party. As I said, the majority of the Democratic base is more sympathetic to the Palestinian rights. The majority of the Democratic base is more supportive of civil liberties in the United States for American citizens. They're less racist when compared to the Republican Party. And I'm not talking about less racist in terms of the Muslim community or American Muslim community, but also against Black African Americans, against Latinos, in general. So there are more reasons for us to support Democrats as opposed to Republicans. And we have more allies within Democrats as opposed to Republicans. We have more of a receptive base in Democrats as opposed to Republicans. But the Democratic establishment, and not talking about the base now, I'm talking about the establishment, has made it very difficult for us morally to support Kamala Harris, to support the Democratic candidates. We cannot, with a good conscience, support Kamala Harris when she supports genocide or she's enabling genocide as the vice president. Again, she's not the Democratic nominee or candidate for presidency only. She is the vice president, the current vice president. Her word has a weight. She can and she must do the right thing. If she believes that what is happening in Gaza is heartbreaking, as she called it, a devastation, a disaster, she's been more outgoing. She's been more enthusiastic speaking about the Palestinian agony and Palestinian pain in Gaza as opposed to or compared to Biden. All what we wanted from her is to pledge that she's going to hold Israel responsible, or at least restrain Israel from continuing this genocide, this madness in Gaza. She hasn't given us this. So it's still, there are those who continue to say, again, we have one president at a time. It's Biden, it's not Kamala Harris. Don't expect her to go against the sitting president because that's bad for her and it's a bad precedent. The only one who has done this in 2016 was Trump against Obama at the end of his presidency in December, when the Obama administration allowed a UN Security Council resolution to condemn Israel in December 2016 for continuing its settlement building and expansion in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. But Trump came out and spoke out against it at the time, which was unprecedented for a president-elect to do against a sitting president at the time. So they're making these arguments, and maybe on a personal level, I would maybe relate to these arguments that yes, still we have more Democrats to work with. We have more opportunities to influence the Democratic administration as opposed to influence a Republican administration. But morally, we're being crippled by her inability, her unwillingness to speak out clearly against the Israeli genocide, and not only to sympathize with the Palestinian victims. There is a perpetrator here. The Palestinian victims are not dying because of a disease. They're not dying because of a natural disaster. They're dying because there is a criminal that is committing a genocide against them, and that is Israel. And Israel is being supported by the United States. And the administration in place now is a Democratic administration. It's Biden-Harris's administration. We cannot neglect these facts. Morally, we cannot. Politically, I can understand. We can make the calculation, but morally, I cannot make the calculation. And the majority have, in our community, have decided that we cannot, compromise our moral convictions for political expediency. Is it wise politics? I might say no. But is it the right moral stand? I would say yes. Not everyone can make that make that assessment and compromise the moral stand for political expediency. It is a very difficult call for us as a community. It is a very difficult call for America itself, because at the end of the day, if Trump is elected, it's not on the Muslims. Kamala Harris cannot go against the reproductive rights groups in the Democratic base. She cannot go against the same-sex marriage base in the Democratic base, the LGBTQ community. She cannot go against the African American base within the Democratic Party. Why only us who are being now demanded to support Kamala Harris when she does not support us? She does not support what we stand for. What we stand for is moral. What we stand for is ethical. What we stand for is humane. What she stands for is immoral and ethical, and we cannot embrace her for that. So it is on her. If Trump wins, he does not pose a threat only to the Muslim community. He does not pose a threat only to Palestine. He poses a threat to the United States. That's what everyone is saying. That's not what we're claiming. That's what Democrats are saying. This is what Biden is saying. Biden is warning America of autocracy if Trump wins. Trump is promising that it will be a one-time election cycle. One-time election this cycle if he wins. That's what he said. So America has to deal with Trump, and America has to neutralize Trump, because Trump is bad for America. If they want to prevent him from winning, then they have to do the right thing and stand on a moral ground, as Biden promised when he was running in 2020. He said that he wanted to restore, and that's what he said, I'm quoting here, America's moral authority. Does anyone see America's moral authority now in Gaza? No one sees that American moral authority, because what we see is immoral. What we see is enabling a genocide and being partner in a genocide. So if we will hold Democrats based on their promises and based on their slogans, we cannot support Democrats. But if Democrats are true to their values that they claim, then they will call and enact an immediate permanent ceasefire in Gaza, and they will impose an arms embargo on Israel, and then we won't have a problem supporting Kamala Harris or any Democratic nominee.
Some analysts have said that voting third party, or allowing rather Trump to win, is beneficial to the American Muslim community in the United States, because for once you can now say that an American presidential candidate lost an election because they supported Israel. And they also say that the American Muslim community, as well as America, has already survived 4 years of Trump. Now, you're mentioning in what you said there that Trump is alluding to the fact that he doesn't want another election after this. Do you believe there is some truth to this statement, that if Kamala Harris loses because she supports genocide, implicitly or explicitly, that this could put the Muslim community in America in a more politically stronger position?
So this is a valid argument, and it does exist, and many of us believe in this. But there are also those who are counter this argument by saying Trump he's coming back with a vendetta. Not only against the American Muslim community, but also he's coming with a vendetta against what he calls the deep state, against the Justice Department, the FBI, Democrats, what he calls rhinos, Republicans only in name, who abandoned him in 2020 when he wanted to steal the elections. So he comes with a vendetta. Now, if he goes against all of the above, against Democrats, against the deep state, against Muslim Americans, against Latino Americans, against the media, which he calls the enemy of the state, then the American Muslims will have a chance to push back and survive another 4 years of Trump. Because, again, he will be distracted fighting all of these powerful forces in America. But there are those who are worried that Trump will start with the American Muslim community. He will start with us by going after our organizations, shutting down our organizations, enacting the Muslim ban again, enabling Israel to finish, as he said it. And I'm just putting it, or I'm now attributing this to him when he said that Israel should finish the job. So he wants to allow Netanyahu to finish the job, meaning he wants Israel to continue the genocide and to evict the Palestinians from Gaza and control the whole Gaza, which he's promising a new Singapore in Gaza, because again, he's a realtor and he thinks in terms of real estate. Gaza for him is another real estate property. That's how he sees it. So he doesn't want the Palestinians to exist there. So if he starts with this, if he starts with going after the American Muslim community, after students who demonstrated and engaged in encampments against the Israeli genocide, if he goes after Palestinian activists, if he goes after Palestinian voices, if he goes after Gaza and continue to support Israel to, so again, quote unquote, finish the job, then that would be a losing argument for us to say that we survived 4 years and we can survive another 4 years. But if we are able to inject ourselves into the broader movement, the anti-Trump movement in America, then I would say, yes, this is a winning argument. It is very difficult now to assess which argument holds more weight, because we don't know what Trump might be planning. If he can be self-disciplined as his allies are demanding from him, then he will be focused only on us. And after he finishes the job, he will go and continue with the rest. But if he can maintain self-discipline, which by the way, this is part of his nature, he cannot be disciplined, then I would say, yes, maybe if we are successful in making Biden a one-term presidency by not allowing Kamala Harris to extend that presidency to a second term, Democrats will pay attention, and next time they might reassess their stand, this complete complicity with Israel. But if that doesn't work, then we'll be in a very difficult position. Some are saying also, if Trump wins and he decides to go after the American Muslim community, Democrats are not going to be as supportive as they were in 2017 when Trump enacted the Muslim ban. Democrats stood against him at that time. Now they don't have the same incentive to stand against him if Kamala Harris loses because of the American Muslim vote. Again, it's a very difficult balance to do here. I can relate to both arguments, but again, the Muslim community is in a very difficult position because a lot of us see a vote to Kamala Harris is a vote for genocide, while others are saying, yes, you're right, but a vote for Trump or no vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Trump and a vote for more genocide in Gaza. I'm not sure how we can rationalize the difficult situation that we're faced with now.
You've mentioned there about the possibility of organizations being shut down. Throughout the American history and of Palestinian activism, some organizations have already been shut down. One of the most prominent ones being the Holy Land Foundation. They were accused of funneling money to terrorist organizations, and many of those working in that organization ended up in prison for 60 odd years. Could you take us through the recollection of your recollection of what happened with that saga, and is there any hope for those who have been imprisoned to be released?
So let's remember and let's put this in context. This happened in the aftermath of 9/11. After 9/11, the Patriot Act was passed. The Patriot Act is almost more of a martial law against that was imposed on Muslims. I don't see the situation today comparable to what happened after 9/11. Our community now is more advanced, more sophisticated, more engaged, more integrated into the broader society. And we have organizations, not only Muslim organizations, but also we have American organizations that are fighting for civil liberties and constitutional rights in America. So I'm not going to compare the two, this era now, to what happened right after 9/11. Also, the Muslim community is more sophisticated in terms of understanding the laws. I continue to firmly believe that these individuals who were convicted after 9/11, in the case of the Holy Land Foundation, are innocent. But what they used against them is circumstantial evidence. Our community now is more aware of the fact that there are circumstantial evidence that are unconstitutional to be used against any defendant, but they have been used. So Muslims are more clear and more cautious of the facts and cautious of the surrounding and the targeting campaign against them. Still, a Republican administration can go after our organizations by executive orders, not by judiciary rulings. They can go after us by executive orders, and we've seen one scenario that just happened recently against the Samidun, which is not an American organization; it's a Canadian organization. The leader of it is a Canadian citizen, but still, it was designated as a terrorist organization by an executive order. We've seen also other individuals in Europe who have been accused by the United States of being financiers of Hamas. Again, these are executive orders. Under a Republican administration, most likely these executive orders might be applied to American organizations. We don't want to see this happen. We will fight through the judiciary system against any anticipated decisions by a potential Trump presidency, but these are real concerns that we have as a Muslim community that will be targeted based on frivolous lawsuits, will be targeted based on baseless accusations, and you will be denied your right to have a due process, and we will be accused and convicted in the public opinion domain. These are real concerns that we have. Democrats have not enacted these tactics against the Muslim community so far. What happened in 2001 was under the Bush administration, which was a Republican administration. Under the Obama administration, there was an ease. I'm not going to say that he was friendly to the Muslim to the Muslim community, but it wasn't as tense as it was under Trump, under Bush, and it wasn't as tense under Trump. Under Biden, now we see that there are efforts by the Justice Department to investigate many of our leaders, to investigate some of our organizations, but they haven't acted yet based on these investigations. Trump is promising to immediately start shutting these organizations. So it's a very, again, I was involved in the decision not to endorse Kamala Harris, but at the same time, I understand the complexity and the dangers that this entails in terms of potentially having a Trump presidency. But we'll continue to fight for our rights as American citizens, as American institutions, because we're not going to accept that anyone imposes on us a perception that we don't belong to America and we don't enjoy the same equal rights as any American citizen in the United States.
Recently, some Australian student activists have referred their own university to the ICC, highlighting their complicity in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Now, I don't want to say that the student movement protesting genocide started in the US, but it definitely came to global prominence through the United States encampments, starting off with Columbia University. Where, in your estimation, is the student movement at today?
Let us remember that there was the, okay. I think now the student movement is not as strong as it started for the Palestinian rights. And let us put this in context. There are a lot of students who have been expelled, a lot of students who have been suspended, a lot of students who are being persecuted now on baseless allegations that they have engaged in anti-Semitic incidents or crimes. The students didn't find the support that they expected, not from the Muslim community, not from the society, but they did not find the support in the judicial system, where you had Zionist organizations bringing frivolous lawsuits against students and student bodies, against organizations like American Muslims for Palestine, the organization that I lead, accusing us of propagating anti-Semitism, threatening lives of Jewish students, which again, these are baseless allegations. So a lot of students now are afraid, and we can't take this away from them. We've seen the police brutality in Los Angeles. We've seen the police brutality in Washington, D.C. We've seen the police brutality in Columbia University in New York against students. And we've seen the government's brutality and its willingness to abdicate its adherence to the U.S. Constitution, to the civil rights of its citizens, and go after these students. I'm not going to say that this is the end of the student movement, because now we're starting a new semester. We might be surprised again by the resilience of the students, but I don't think we will see it with the same momentum that existed during last summer and the fall before, the winter before. So, or the spring, I'm sorry. I cannot predict where things are going, but definitely there will be some activities by the students, but not at the same level with the same momentum. And I hope I'm wrong here, because students have proved us time and time again, proved us wrong time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, looking at how things started as well, I mean, no one was expecting the kind of publicity and that the student movement would get. But I guess that was, in a way, the response to the encampments actually created that kind of publicity. For example, had the Columbia University administration not sent in police to take encampments down, had there not been this police brutality, I think the world wouldn't have even batted an eye about the encampments.
The way the campus administrations responded to the students, the way the government responded to the students, the way the president himself spoke about the students, the Speaker of the House, when he went to Columbia University and threatened the students with expulsions, threatened administrations of universities with punishments and sanctions, including the former president of Columbia University, who was pro-Israel, pro-genocide, against student rights, against their encampments. Still, she was under pressure and she was chastised by Netanyahu himself, by Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and she ended up getting forced to resign. So yes, they helped elevating the cause of these students and what they stand for and what the message that they wanted to communicate and relate to the broader American society. It's unfortunate that they did not enjoy the same depth that the student movement enjoyed in the 1960s against the Vietnam War, because at that time there was a draft. The young Americans were drafted into the army to go and fight in Vietnam. During the 1980s, It was against apartheid in South Africa, although the U.S. government at the time, the Reagan administration, was complicit in supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa. But you had a sizable African American community and a sizable Democratic base and including Republicans at the time, who were against apartheid in South Africa. The student movement now did not enjoy the same depth, the same width, and definitely there is an arch enemy that is going after you. We're talking about the Zionist lobby, who accuses anyone who dares to criticize Israel of being anti-Semitic. So they're trying to distract, and they're trying to change the narrative of these students who are against genocide. They're not against Jews, but what the Zionist movement tried to portray it, and they had access to the media, or they tried to make it about Jews and about the safety of Jews and about anti-Semitism in America, about the terrorism and about the right of self-defense in case of Israel. So they were successful to some extent in altering the narrative. This did not exist in the 1980s, and this did not exist in the 1960s. So if I'm going to assess the student movement in 2023 and 2024, I would say the student movement was going against against forces that are so powerful that the 1960s students and the 1980s students did not face. So I would give them more credit in terms of this moral courage, in terms of this political courage, in terms of this humanity that they demonstrated, and the resilience that they have shown. I would give them more credit because they were going against the forces of a very powerful institutions in America.
On a final note, Dr. Osama, we have seen over a year of genocide. We are currently at a stage where the Israeli government is willing to expand the genocide to Lebanon and possibly all-out war with Iran. We have an American administration that is unable to keep its leash on the Zionist entity. We have an upcoming election where both of the choices won't get us a clear route to ending the genocide. What's your message to people who look at the current situation and think there's no hope?
You know, one thing I learned from my experience in America: if you don't fight for your rights, for your convictions, for what you believe in, you're definitely going to lose. And yes, then you can say there is no hope. I'm someone who was denied of his citizenship based on baseless accusations between 2006 and 2015. And when I decided to take on the government and go to the court, the government ended up giving me my citizenship without a fight in courts in 2017, and I got it on September 11, 2017. My name is Osama, and everyone understands the significance of September 11th in the American history. I was given my citizenship on that day when America was attacked by terrorists on September 11th, and the mastermind was Osama bin Laden. This is what America is about. You fight for your rights. This is what America is about, is that you don't give up, and you continue to resist the whatever repression that exists. So that's one. Two, let us remember that we're not the only nation on the face of earth. America, yes, it might be the most powerful. It's the most powerful nation. Yes, America enjoys hegemony and dominance, but the rest of the world, America is a small island in an ocean, and we cannot neglect that. At the end of the day, the future of this region, the Arab and Muslim region, is not in the hands of America alone. It's in the hands of its own people. The people need to rise up. they need to implement change here. And that's when America will respect them. When you have governments that are representative of their own people. Had we had governments that represent the will of their people, the genocide would have ended in the first week when it started. Because America has to assess, has to balance its national interest, its security interest, and say, you know what, we're not going to lose a 1.2 billion or 1.5 billion Muslims just for Israel. I remember when at the end of October 2023, there were cables from the US embassy in Oman that were leaked. They were sent to the State Department. They were leaked that talked about the potential of the US losing a whole Arab generation. There was that real worry that America is going to lose the Arab masses, will use the young Arab, the youth in the Arab world, when America now is focused more on the Indo-Pacific region. That America calls China the most consequential competitor of the United States, that wants to end the Americans' dominance and hegemony in the world. So they were looking at this part of the world as an ally. And the US embassy in Oman was warning that we're cautioning that we might lose this generation, we might lose these allies in our competition rivalry with China. Unfortunately, we have proved them wrong. We have proved them wrong when we did not amount enough pressure on these regimes in this part of the world to pressure the United States and say, look, if you want stability here, if you want to maintain your interests here, then you have to help us in this genocide. There was no counter pressure on America as opposed to the Zionist pressure on the administration to continue its complicity and support of the genocide in Gaza. So let us remember that America, at the end of the day, is a rational state, and it will make decisions based on its calculations of its interest and the benefit risk analysis. Let us remember this, and let us build this momentum in the Arab world to demand the change and to implement this change, while we also continue to do our part in America as American citizens to demand that our country does the right thing, that our elected officials abide and adhere to the Constitution, to the values that America holds dear. When it comes to liberty, equality, justice for all. This is what America stands for. Now, I'm not going to say that this is what our policy has demonstrated for decades and centuries. That's not what our policy has demonstrated. But we continue to demand that we want to see America in line with the values that we cherish, in line with the Constitution, in line with the values that we claim to want to propagate, and a change in the Arab and Muslim world that build enough momentum where the current regimes understand that their stability is conditioned upon bringing this genocide to an end, is conditioned upon, representing the will of their people, and is conditioned upon serving the best interest of their own people. If we can't have this combination, I don't think anything is going to change. But I'm not going to, to forecast failure or to predict failure or to assume that whatever we do is not going to work. We will die fighting for what is right and forbidding what is wrong. That's what our mission is about. That's what our lives is about. That's what our nature is about as human beings, and that's what my religion is about. I don't foresee failure, and I don't predict failure, and I don't give up and surrender and lose hope just because the challenges are so immense. No, we continue to try to change the situation. We don't get to choose the challenges that we face, the obstacles that we're up against, but what we get to choose is our efforts to overcome whatever obstacles and to neutralize whatever challenges pop up in our ways.
Dr. Osama, thank you for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you.